This isn't just my story. It's a story about hope when medicine runs out, about faith when logic says no, about miracles that still happen today. If something inside you is stirring right now, please stay with me. What I'm about to share might be exactly what you need to hear. My name is Omar, and I'm 31 years old now. But my story really begins when I was just 16 years old, sitting in a chemistry class on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I remember the teacher was explaining something about molecules when suddenly the room started spinning. The walls seemed to bend and twist like they were made of rubber. I tried to stand up, tried to tell someone something was wrong, but my legs wouldn't obey me anymore. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the cold floor with people's faces hovering above me, their mouths moving but their voices sounding like they were coming from underwater. My body was shaking violently, completely out of my control. My classmates told me later that my eyes had rolled back and foam was coming from my mouth. They were terrified. Honestly, so was I when I finally understood what had happened. The ambulance came quickly. I remember fragments of that ride to the hospital. The sirens wailing, the paramedics' concerned face, my mother's hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. She was praying under her breath, calling on God in a way I'd never heard her pray before. There was desperation in her voice that scared me more than anything else. At the hospital, they ran tests. So many tests. They put me inside a massive machine that made loud banging noises while I had to lie perfectly still. They stuck needles in my arms, asked me endless questions, shined lights in my eyes. The doctors had serious expressions that made my stomach twist with fear. Then came the moment that changed everything. A doctor with gray hair and tired eyes sat down with my parents and me in a small, sterile room that smelled like disinfectant. He had papers in his hands and an expression I'll never forget. He told us they had found something in my brain, a tumor. He explained it was located on my left frontal lobe, the part of the brain that controls personality, emotions, and decision-making. He showed us the scan images, pointing to a round white mass that he said was about the size of a golf ball. My mother gasped when she saw it. My father's face went pale. I just stared at it, unable to fully process that this thing was inside my head, growing where it shouldn't be. The doctor continued explaining, and his words felt like hammers pounding into my chest. He revealed that the tumor was embedded so deeply into my brain tissue that surgery was impossible. He told us that trying to remove it would cause damage that would either kill me or leave me in a vegetative state. Those were his exact words, though I try not to remember them too precisely. The doctor informed us that my only option was to manage the symptoms for the rest of my life. He explained that I would have to deal with epilepsy from that point forward. The seizures I'd just experienced would become a regular part of my existence. He prescribed medications with long, complicated names that I couldn't pronounce. He warned me about the side effects, things like mood swings, depression, confusion, and memory problems. He mentioned that I might also develop bipolar disorder as the tumor affected the chemical balance in my brain. I was only 16 years old, and suddenly my future looked completely different than I'd imagined. No more playing sports because a seizure could happen at any moment. No more swimming because I could drown if I had an episode in the water. No driving when I got older. No living alone. Always needing someone nearby in case something went wrong. My parents tried to stay strong for me, but I could see the grief in their eyes. My mother cried every night for weeks. My father stopped smiling. My younger sister became afraid of me, worried that I might collapse again at any moment. At that time in my life, I didn't know anything about God. My family wasn't religious. We were cultural Muslims, meaning we identified with the faith but didn't practice it seriously. We didn't pray 5 times a day. We didn't read the Quran regularly. God was just a distant concept, something people talked about but not someone who felt real or involved in daily life. So when this diagnosis came, I had nowhere to turn spiritually. I didn't know how to pray for healing. I didn't know that miracles were possible. I just accepted what the doctors said as absolute truth. This was my reality now, my cross to bear, as some people say, my burden to carry for however many years I had left. The medications made me feel like a zombie. My thoughts moved slowly, like wading through thick mud. My emotions were all over the place. 1 hour I'd feel fine, almost normal. The next hour I'd be overwhelmed with sadness for no clear reason. Then anger would surge up inside me, making me want to break things or scream at people I loved. The seizures continued despite the medication. Sometimes I'd have small ones where I'd just zone out for a few seconds, staring blankly while the world moved around me. Other times they were major episodes where I'd collapse wherever I was, my body convulsing uncontrollably while people called for help. I lost jobs because of my condition. Employers didn't want to deal with the liability of having someone who might suddenly have a seizure at work. I lost friends because my mood swings made me unpredictable and sometimes mean. I lost confidence because I felt broken, damaged, less than everyone else around me. This went on for 17 long years. 17 years of medications, doctor visits, emergency room trips, and feeling like my body was a prison I couldn't escape. 17 years of watching other people live normal lives while mine remained on hold. 17 years of wondering why this had happened to me. During those years, I got married to a wonderful woman named Layla, who loved me despite my condition. She learned how to help me during seizures, how to recognize the warning signs, how to keep me safe. We had 2 beautiful children together, a son and a daughter, but there was always fear hanging over our family. My kids grew up seeing their father collapse without warning. They learned to call for help before they even learned to ride bicycles. That's not how childhood should be. Then something shifted. I started hearing about this place, a ministry that taught about healing and God's love in ways I'd never encountered before. People kept mentioning it to me, telling me I should check it out. At first I dismissed it. I'd accepted my condition as permanent. The doctors had been clear. This was incurable. Why get my hopes up only to be disappointed? But the suggestions kept coming from different people who didn't even know each other. It felt like more than coincidence. So finally I decided to visit this ministry. I enrolled in something they called a foundations course, a basic teaching about who God is and how he relates to his people. I went in as a skeptic. I'd been hurt by false hope before, but as I sat in those classes, something began changing inside me. The teachers explained God's character in ways that made him seem real and personal rather than distant and uncaring. They talked about Jesus not just as a historical figure but as someone alive today who still heals people. One day during the course, the instructor gave us an assignment that seemed simple but felt terrifying to me. She encouraged us to ask God to show us how much he loves us. Just ask him directly and wait to see what happens. I thought it sounded strange, maybe even childish. But that night, alone in my room, I whispered into the darkness. I asked God if he was really there and if he actually cared about me specifically. What happened next is hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. I didn't hear an audible voice, but inside my mind, inside my heart, there was a response that felt more real than any conversation I'd ever had. I sensed God telling me that what I was going through, this journey with the tumor and the seizures and all the pain, this was our journey together. He showed me that he'd been with me through every hospital visit, every seizure, every moment of despair. And he whispered to me that I should watch what was about to happen next. I didn't fully understand what he meant, but something shifted in my spirit that night. Hope began growing again, hope I'd buried long ago. Shortly after finishing the foundations course, I attended something called a healing school at the same ministry. I wasn't even attending as someone seeking healing. I'd actually volunteered to help with the technical equipment, running the sound and video systems from a booth at the back of the room. During one of the worship sessions, I was standing in that booth adjusting audio levels and making sure everything was working properly. But the songs being sung started reaching deeper into my heart than I expected. The words talked about God's power, his love, his desire to heal and restore broken people. Suddenly, while I was standing there with my hands on the sound controls, something rose up inside me. It was like a dam breaking. All the years of resignation, of accepting my condition, of believing nothing could change, all of that suddenly felt wrong. In that moment, I spoke to God from the deepest part of my being. I told him I was finished carrying this burden. I explained that this tumor and these seizures had been my identity for 17 years, but I didn't want them to define me anymore. The instant I released those words, something extraordinary happened. The worship leader, a man named Ibrahim, suddenly stopped singing mid-song. The music trailed off as he stood silent for a moment. Then he spoke out to the room, announcing that someone had just been healed of a brain tumor right then in that very moment. As soon as he said those words, I felt something physical happen inside my head. It was like a cracking sensation, like ice breaking or a shell shattering. It wasn't painful, but it was definitely real. I could physically feel something changing in my brain. Tears started pouring down my face uncontrollably. I began sobbing right there in the sound booth. not caring who saw me or what they thought. I knew in that instant that the healing Ibrahim had announced was mine. God had just touched me. After 17 years of doctors saying nothing could be done, God had done something impossible. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. I knew something had happened, but I needed to stand firm on that healing. For the next 10 months, I continued taking my medications while declaring that I was healed. It felt contradictory sometimes. Why was I still taking pills if God had healed me? But I felt God telling me to be patient, to trust the process, to not rush ahead of His timing. During those 10 months, I had no seizures. Not one. That was unusual in itself because I typically had at least 2 or 3 episodes every month despite the medication. But I was seizure-free for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Then came a test that shook me to my core. I was attending another healing event at the ministry when suddenly, without any warning, I collapsed with the most severe migraine I'd ever experienced in my life. The pain was blinding, like someone was driving nails through my skull. All the familiar sensations that preceded my seizures came flooding back. The dizziness, the confusion, the loss of control. People rushed me to the hospital immediately. As I lay in the ambulance, fear tried to overwhelm me. Was the tumor back? Had I imagined the healing? Was I fooling myself? But then, sitting in that hospital bed waiting for test results, I had another conversation with God. I reminded Him of what He'd told me, of what had happened in that worship service. I declared that we'd agreed this was finished, this burden was lifted. I asked Him directly what was happening, why I was experiencing these symptoms if I'd truly been healed. In my spirit, I heard Him respond with such gentle clarity. He assured me that the healing was complete, that this was just the enemy's final attempt to make me doubt. God encouraged me to demand proof, to ask for the medical tests that would confirm what He'd already done, so I did. When the doctor came in to discuss treatment options, I requested a full brain scan. I wanted to see current images of my brain to know exactly what was happening in there. The medical team agreed and ran a comprehensive CAT scan. Then I waited. The minutes felt like hours as they analyzed the results. When the doctor finally returned to my room, he had the strangest expression on his face. It was confusion mixed with disbelief. He sat down and informed me that the tumor was gone. Completely gone. He couldn't find any trace of it. He checked the old scans from years ago to confirm the location, then looked at the new images again. Nothing. Where there had once been a golf ball-sized mass embedded in my brain tissue, there was now only healthy, normal brain matter. The doctor admitted he thought I might be lying or confused about my medical history. He explained that tumors in that location, with that level of embedding, simply don't disappear on their own. It was medically impossible. He had no explanation for what he was seeing, but I knew. I knew exactly what had happened. God had reached into my skull and removed what man said was impossible to remove. He'd done surgery without scalpels, healing without medicine, a miracle without any natural explanation. I left that hospital completely free for the first time since I was 16 years old. No more tumor, no more seizures, no more medications with their terrible side effects. No more living in fear of the next episode. The impact on my family has been beyond words. My children no longer have to worry about finding their father convulsing on the floor. My wife no longer lives with the constant anxiety of wondering if today will be the day something terrible happens. We can plan for the future without medical limitations hanging over us. But the most important change is in my spirit. I now know that God is real, that His love is personal, that His power still works today just like it did in the Bible stories I'd heard as a child. I learned that healing isn't something we have to earn or deserve. It's a gift that God freely offers, and all we have to do is receive it. I discovered all of this at that ministry, starting with those foundation classes that taught me about God's love. The instructors shared the revelation they'd received, not keeping it to themselves, but generously giving it away to anyone who wanted to learn. They showed me that I didn't need to live under the curse of what doctors declared over me. They taught me that God's word is more powerful than any medical diagnosis. Now I get to be the one who goes out and shares this truth with others. I get to tell people who are suffering that God's love is absolutely real, that His healing power hasn't diminished, that miracles still happen in our modern world. I get to look people in the eyes and promise them that there's hope beyond what doctors can offer. All of this started when I simply asked God to show me how much He loves me. That one vulnerable prayer opened a door I didn't even know existed. It began a journey from hopelessness to complete healing, from despair to overwhelming joy. If you're watching this right now and you're dealing with a medical condition that doctors say is incurable, I want to speak directly to you. Don't give up. Don't accept that diagnosis as your final truth. God has the last word, not doctors. He loves you specifically and personally, and He wants to heal you. This story isn't unique to me. All around the world right now, followers of Jesus are facing persecution, suffering, imprisonment, and even death because of their faith. They're standing firm in countries where believing in Jesus could cost them everything. They're continuing to worship in secret, to share the gospel despite threats, to trust God even when circumstances look impossible. I want to encourage every Christian watching this to pray for these brave brothers and sisters. Pray for believers in hostile nations who gather in hidden places to worship. Pray for those in prison cells because they refuse to deny Jesus. Pray for families who've lost loved ones to persecution. Pray that they'll have supernatural strength, divine protection, and an unshakable confidence in God's goodness. And if you're watching this and you don't yet know Jesus personally, if you're curious about this faith that inspires such devotion, I want to invite you to meet Him right now. You don't need to clean up your life first. You don't need to become a better person before approaching Him. He accepts you exactly as you are in this moment. You can talk to Jesus right where you're sitting. Just speak to Him honestly from your heart. Tell Him you're sorry for the things you've done wrong, for the times you've lived as if He doesn't exist. Ask Him to forgive you and to come into your life. Invite Him to be your Lord and Savior. Thank Him for dying on the cross to pay for your sins and for rising from the dead to give you new life. It's that simple. God isn't looking for perfect people. He's looking for people who recognize they need Him. When you open your heart to Jesus, He comes in and begins transforming you from the inside out. He gives you a fresh start, a new identity, and a hope that can't be shaken by circumstances. If you prayed that prayer just now, welcome to the family of God. You've made the most important decision of your entire life. I encourage you to find a Bible-believing church in your area where you can grow in your faith, connect with other believers, and learn more about following Jesus. My name is Omar. I carried a death sentence in my brain for 17 years. Today I'm completely healed because God stepped into my impossible situation and did what only He could do. If He did it for me, He can do it for you too. Never stop believing. Never stop hoping. Never stop trusting that our God is the God of miracles.